Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for being here. I see many friends around, and that's my pleasure to host you today for this concept that we wanted to develop, and we with the consortium we wanted to do something that is legitimate in Brunello, if there's a need to do so. But we wanted to do something that is not always tasting the last vintage available on the market. Although we said, okay, let's try to have a sort of more sparkling concept. So a 10-year challenge is something that people have been posting on social media, no? Their pictures 10 years before and at the moment of the post itself. The same thing we want to do with Brunello. Of course, we have these 5 years of offset. In this case, last vintage, we're gonna taste it 2018, sorry. In 2008, we're gonna start. So, before we go through that, for many people we have today, there is the need to go inside Montalcino, to go inside Brunello, just for a few minutes, so that there is a context people can enjoy when tasting the wines. We will have 12 wines and I'll tell you later, but just a few minutes just to tell you where Montalcino is, 33rd parallel north. Here's the area of production, just the square part. This other part is only part of the commune, not for wine. And you can see 31 plus 1,000 hectares. Remember that. We are UNESCO World Heritage since 2004, together with all the Valdorcia Park. And the hilltop town of Montalcino sits at 564 meters. And you'll see why this is coming functional to what I'm saying. So 4,100 hectares of vineyards in total. I told you, almost 32,000. So 1/6 of the area is planted with vineyards. It's something that you don't see often in high quality area. So there is a lot of biodiversity. You tell olive groves, there is a lot of forest. I mean, even contiguous one. It's very interesting to see how Montalcino was able to preserve the other type of crops with regards to the vineyard plantation. What we have, what we care about today, Brunello, 2,100 hectares as opposed to 1/4 of Rosso. The rest is Moscadello, or for example, this, quite a big number, is only for Toscana IGT. We have now 208 bottling wineries in a space that it's not as extended. So the average area for each bottling winery will be around 2.5 hectares. What is the climate about? So we have a typical Mediterranean climate. We can still say so. Warm summers, sometimes hot, and cool winter. And the average annual rainfall is about 700 millimeters. Or at least, sometimes we wish we could reach, sometimes we go over. And this is the case of the two vintages we're tasting today. But let's come to a crucial point, ultimately. So, you see the green areas that are the ones that are bordering the appellation. So you have the three rivers that are actually composing the sort of political borders of the Montalcino municipality, are the ones that, of course, are the lowest in altitude, less than 180 meters. But the most of the appellation is in between 180 to 500, while some, let's say, very central part of the appellation, it's over 500. I tell you that because it's been since few years that the actual production regulation said over 600 you cannot claim anymore Brunello. Okay, this is not any more true. Sara, ciao. Please do find your way to your place. Welcome. And Why I do care about altimetry? Because altimetry guides the type of soil and not only, and the type of slope. So you can see Montalcino is an island, sort of island, no? Sitting here, you have the top of the island here where the town is. Christina, come here, this is your place, welcome. And this regulates pretty much the multitude of soils, and very high variability that we have throughout the appellation. So we can identify 4 areas of same soils. So northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest. And I try to sort of frame these in these other pictures. So you imagine cardinal points here as well. So the most classic sort of terroir for Montalcino, which is the Galestro, as you can see, so compressed clay over time, very old, 35, 40 million plus, as opposed to, for example, sandstone, that is in the lowest part of the southwestern area, so where the rivers confluent, and you have a mixture in between the very blue-gray clay that you find in the southern, northern east part, and in the sandstone just in the northwestern part. And you can see after that that there is not much vineyard in the north western part, or at least there are some big players that have single plots. But the most classic part we can consider to be the one that is sitting around the Montalcino town or city, as the Pope said in 1416. I'm not saying that Montalcino is a city, but the Pope said. And I have big players in the southwestern quadrant, like Banfi, Coldorcia, Argiano, Castelgiocondo, you find over there. Over here, there is much fragmentation. This is where Castelnuovo dell'Abate is, so the southeastern part. And I finish telling you, showing just you how it changes the landscape, the panorama, while looking. Ciao Wojtek, fantastic. We have the first Polish master of wine here with us. Welcome Wojtek, great to see you. So everybody's here. So Wojtek, he knows Montalcino pretty well. So I think the introduction, and I couldn't get him on my Montalcino NW trip, but this year you booked. I tell you now, and we have all, yeah. Also for the, yeah. Who's that? Oh, the president. Oh, president. Good morning. Okay. Okay. There was an emotional moment, but let's not lose time. Okay. Okay. Let's go through. So northwestern slope. You see, facing Siena and from Buonconvento looking for Montalcino hilltop town. You see how the hills are a bit rolling, not harsh. Southwestern slope, even lower, you can tell that everything that sits after the slopes is going down, it's outside of the appellation. So everything you see at the horizon, outside of the appellation. And so the other way, we took the pictures, so Castello Banfi, for example, and Sant'Angelo in Colle here, you see lower sort of area, looks lower, it isn't, it is actually a higher plane. While northeastern slope, the one that is very rich in clay, you can see it's overlooking Siena over here. And this looks as an aerial picture, but this is a picture I took from a parking lot in Montalcino. So you see how, I mean, it changes pretty steeply here, and the Valdorcia sits over here, so Pienza and the eastern part of the appellation. The southeastern slope is the one that is characterized by this sort of landmark, which is the Mount Amiata, sheltering the appellation from the rainfall and bad weather in general. High altitude, 450 plus, some cases, Sant'Antimo Church, and once again, the Mount Amiata. So, I don't want to expand on Sangiovese, or at least I don't want to do it in the moment. I ask the sommeliers to pour the first wine, and with total tranquility and peace, because we're gonna expand on these things. Very interesting to compare two vintages like 2008, 2018. If you ask the producer around the tasting area here, they will say, two cool vintages, two wet and cool vintages. But there is a very important thing that we can extract from the seasonal figures from the appellation. One is the mean annual temperature, which in 2008 was 13.4, while being more than a degree more in 2018. But not only, you can tell that we had double the days, plus almost 3 times the days over 32 degrees centigrades in 2018 as opposed to 2008. So another element will be to check what was the rainfall figure like. And I have it here. As you can see, there's no much difference between the two. Even if, 50 millimeters is not much. But what is very interesting is that in 2018 you had only 16 days of rain during the season. During the growing season, we mean April 1st, October 1st, while the double were in 2018. Therefore, you have 270 millimeters and just below double of it in 2018. So what's the message? 2018 was warmer, although considered to be a cooler vintage in the context of the past 15 years now. So you had more rain, but also higher temperature. Something interesting to consider. So, what are we going to do, and how are we going to try to understand these two vintages and to compare these two vintages? The initial idea was to make you taste 6 wines from 2008 straight, one flight, and 6 wines from 2018 straight in another flight. But then we said, this morning actually, but fine-tuning is always something that you need to do. Let's make it look like 2 flights where you have 6 samples, out of which the first 3, so from your left-hand side to your right-hand side, you have 2008, 2008, 2008, and then the 3 samples, 2018, 2018, 2018. And then trying to figure out how to fit these samples that we're tasting within the different areas, different altitude, soils, and of course, style, which is always something that is very important to talk about when we're talking about Montalcino. Because from my personal understanding, when I speak about Montalcino, I feel like it is a sort of confluence between Burgundy and Bordeaux. Why I say so? Because there is a much focus on single vineyard wines and much focus on single slope and cru, an area like Montosoli that is claimed by several producers in the label. But at the same time, there is an house style. There is something that people try to achieve on their labels while saying, okay, this is me and this is my consistency from vintage to vintage. Or at least I try to limit the vintage variation by keeping a style. And I think this is very kind to consumers, because when you have only cru terroir-driven appellation, you are deliberately choosing to produce lesser wines, because you only want wines from a single parcel, and 1 year can be absolutely amazing, the year after can be less amazing. So the savoir-faire, which is something, it's another concept to add onto the terroir, which we know we have. It's something that I think makes a lot of sense in this case. So we will have, starting from the first sample wines from several slopes and area, altitude and styles, that we're gonna compare one to the other. At least the first flight we're gonna compare the 2008, but then you can go in another level of complexity in comparing 2008 to 2018 in the same flight, and I think that sort of makes a lot of difference. So I'll let the sommelier, for example, let's pour this second wine as well, so that we talk about two of them. So what we have here is a producer that you probably never heard about, because it's a very small producer, and it sits in an area of the appellation that originally, when the production regulation was set in 1966, wasn't included in the production regulation itself. Why? Because this area, as I told you, is the one which is strongly colonized by clay, blue clay. The first production regulation of Montalcino, Brunello and Rosso after, said that only soils that were from Eocene could be ascribed and claimed as Brunello. The younger soils, like Pliocene, not Pleistocene, Pliocene, so 4 millions, important, 4 million years old, like this part, clay, couldn't be claimed as Brunello. This changed already a couple of decades ago, so some new producers arrived, and still they can be pretty decent altitude. In this case, Innocenti sits at 350 meters, and it's pretty steep slope, southwestern exposure. So imagine, this is a hot spot, as we can say, in a cooler, although drier vintage. Interesting to see. You have 3,700 plants, meaning that the lower the density, the higher the availability of the same amount of rain for each plant. So you can pretty much mitigate the amount of water that you're not receiving, like in 2008 happened. Let's taste the wine. I think you all have it. So there is just a few, because unfortunately we had 3 corks out of 4 bottles that we had. That was pretty astonishing, but yeah. And this one, you can tell, I mean, the quality of the cork in this case wasn't there, because we have been doing a blind tasting to select these wines, and this really performed well. In this case, we sort of were a bit disappointed about the cork. Let's put it away. So, what is this wine about? I mean, they knew at the time producer, and they pretty much sort of acted in a very simple way. So kept the maceration not that long, kept fermentation temperature below 30, and only had the minimum required for the amount of oak. So 24 months and out. Only 6 months in bottle before releasing on the market. Let's taste it. I know you don't have much of this wine, but it's a good exercise to be able to push this wine through the walls of your mouth to understand one thing that we will better understand in comparison when we're gonna taste the second wine. That is the fact this is a clay soil wine, meaning it has density. You can tell it's ripe, it's dense, and has this chalky, chewy tannins, but at the same time you don't find that sort of depth of flavor and the sort of vibrancy that you often find in other Brunello. To sort of stipulate that, we're moving in the other slope, so northwest, higher altitude. This is 500 plus meters altitude winery, San Lorenzo. Pretty new. I mean, pretty much same age as what Innocenti is. So a winery that started almost 3 decades ago at the moment, not extremely historical. You go on with the pouring because we need to be straight to the point. But what changes here? We have a very late harvest, because what I didn't tell you, and I was about to tell you during every wine tasting, is that because it was a rather cool vintage, and September, at least the early phase of September, was very cool, some wineries had to decide, what should I do? I mean, the plant, it's really stressed because it cannot feel the right temperature to go ahead with the ripening, the phenolic ripening. Although that is difficult because I don't see any horizon where the plant is going to recover. So some of them, especially the one in altitude, had no choice. They needed to harvest late. And there's a story with this guy of San Lorenzo, Mr. Cioffi, Luciano, and he told me that I remember very clearly that this is a vintage that used to be late. And I was stressed because his first daughter was about to be born. No? And so he said, okay, I thought I could start the harvest right before she was born. No, she was born, but he had to harvest very late. And at the time she was born, he had already racked off. So he had to push almost mid-October the harvest. And then what he said, okay, the higher altitude areas like the San Lorenzo need more oak, but it's not a structure in oak because they're full of structure. We taste the wine and then we decide why. You can tell this one has more hedginess to it. The tannins presence you can feel more in the center of your mouth as opposed to the gums as in the clay soils. But you feel that it's a lighter wine. So what it means in a lighter wine, you need some grunt. And you need the grunt by the big oak aging. And therefore you also need to have a sort of polymerization of tannins. That's why he did 36 months in oak, 30-35 hectoliters barrel, and you start to have this sort of developing incense, sort of non-fruity thing that I think is very this slope, northwestern slope, and it is rather assertive. So it is pretty hedgy in this tannin. The tannin is not; it's a bit furry on the tannin, although the wine is very clean. Let's go ahead and compare it to the southeastern part, but in altitude. So La Magia. That is one of, I think the leadership of the winery now is very young and very fragrant, I would say. But it is a rather historical winery. They also have a good library from the 70s, and the same actual vineyard, single plot, facing, as I showed you before, Castelnuovo dell'Abate, Sant'Angelo in Colle, and the Mount Alliano. So it's a very beautiful spot, inclined, looking at southeast. And what they have here, they have a pretty non-dense, medium density style of plantation, so 3,500. So on the limit nowadays, probably going back to that mid density. And still, they had to harvest very late. But here we have a change, we have a switch in style. And I asked the sommelier to go ahead with the next wine. I'll tell you why later. So we have a switch in style. Why? Because the guy here was using Tonneau in a very Bordelaise way, 1/3 new, 1/3 second passage, 1/3 third three passage. And it was using that for 36 months, so it's a pretty long time. Although he never wanted to rock a lot. So this is pretty old style winemaking with some, I'd say, contemporary intuition. So do not give a lot of oxygen during the aging time. Keep the wine lubricated via the noble lees. You can tell it's a totally different wine. Of course, you have the plumpness of the tonneau, you have the licorice exuding. Although here there is clay and sand, and it's a very windy area. Very healthy. You can tell how expansive the wine has become over time. At the moment of the release, I remember tasting at Benvenuto Brunello 2013 and not finding any wine that was ready to drink at the moment. They all were very edgy. They had this sort of herbal nature to them, to the tannins, very sort of cliff thing tannins. So you had this cliff, expanding tannins. At some point, it was going down and having this edgy palate. But after 15 years now, 2008, we don't know. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the intensity of the fruit, the plumpness of the tannin, and the succulence of the tannin. Not only you have that kind of sucrosity, yes, okay, because it's sand, you have more nose and everything. But you have this ability to build a bit of muscle, as opposed to wines that stayed in bigger barrels that now became a bit less fruity. So it's a matter of style. As I think it's worth investigating how, at the time, an almost older vine, so 34, 35 years, was able to produce in this sort of wine that has density, but also dense, as opposed to the first one that had density, but wasn't that going deep. So let's switch the paradigm to 2018, and we start with the softer one. Why softer? Because I put the star here for the where the fruit is sourced, where the winery is. Actually, there is some fruit sourced here, so just on the side of Montalcino, facing Montosoli Hill, but there is much more fruit sourced from here, just not far from La Magia, and also from here, in Vigna Spuntali. So you have three different terroirs. One, as I told you, clay colonized, blue clay, sodic clay. Go ahead. Then you have, in Castelnuovo, you have the typical Galestro, very edgy and sometimes very assertive style of wine produced. Although in Sant'Angelo del Colle, you have what I like to call the Châteauneuf du Pape of Montalcino, because you have this very maritime area. Even if you're not close to the sea, you can see it in some days, especially in winter time. And you have this idea of garrigue, you have this idea of genepi, more Mediterranean fruits and herbs. But this wine, Valdisuga, is the regular one, so it's the Bordelaise style of wine. So sourced in several vineyards to make it in house style. Let's taste it. So remember, 2018, in the context of the last 10 plus years, cool. But in the context of 2008, sorry, is not as cool. I mean, 1 degree difference. And therefore, what they decided to do here, to go on the delicate side, to go, I spoke about the Châteauneuf du Pape style, but in this case we're more in a Volnay style, because we have this idea of delicate saltiness from, of course, limestone that strongly present in Casanova dell'Abate. Tannins are there, but that's super fine, and the body is very agile, it's very easy to approach. So this is a vintage 2018 that gives you the opportunity to have the best of two worlds. One is the world of being cooler, the other is the world of being not stressed by the cold itself or by the lack of water availability. So you have this easy approach. It's a wine that is produced in let's say, relevant volumes. We're talking 280,000 bottles. I mean, it's something very interesting. How do they do that? Cooler fermentation in stainless steel and concrete. There is a shorter, but not that short, maceration as opposed to what is classically made in Montalcino, 20 days, and then only 24 months in oak. I mean, when I say 24 months in Val di Suga, I know that when it's 24 months and 1 day, they say, okay, out. And this is the result. I mean, it's way more approachable, even if it has this polyedric character. You have the limestone character, you have a bit of a clay touch, and the nose, which is very lifted, it's more from the sandy soil. Interesting one to start with the 2018. But then we go a bit much more in detail in an area, as I showed you before, that hasn't got much of producer in this area. There is quite big winery in the context of Montalcino, of course, and ciao, welcome. And so, still in altitude, and this is a wine that is sourced in two areas. One is here, the other one is here. But it's two high elevation areas, and it's a more assertive style. Let's taste it and we discuss. We can be sort of biased when we feel that gentle vanilla touch on the nose, but then you go on the palate and it's a very squared wine, very squared. I mean, it's a bit on if I had to compare it, it's a more Cabernet Sauvignon style, no? You have this rectangular character. And why they do that? Because these two areas, higher altitude, and the oak treatment as well, you can tell, is generous, but at the same time, there is a sort of idea of being early harvested. We go with the third one. Early harvested that keeps this high electricity. No? There is a tension in this one. Even if we sort of opened all these 2 hours ago now, and in the very beginning, at the time of popping the cork of this wine, you say, wow, it is very, very assertive. And I think it's their style in a cooler vintage, because they're two cool sites and windy, so they had the opportunity to have very healthy grapes, but at the same time, the ripeness of these grapes wasn't as they probably wanted that year. So we go for a contrast now. You've been served the last wine of the first flight, which is Ciacci Piccolomini d'Aragona. So we all down Casanova dell'Abate. It's pretty much a single plot, facing the Mount Amiata and facing Maremma. And really goes down into the old riverbed and down now the actual riverbed, the current riverbed of Orcia through the valley. And they have these, let's say, maison style of wine, so the regular Brunello, same idea of what we see for Val di Suca, but all sourced in the same area. There's no other vineyard taking part of the blend. Within the same area, they're able to decide what goes into their basic, if you can say basic, so house style Brunello. And then they have two single vineyards to produce their reserva and of course their cru. So let's taste it and then we decide. You can tell already that from the nose, the ripeness itself, it's a totally different stage. You have both candied orange and blood orange really colonizing your mouth. It's really perfect because it's a combination of calestro, so based on clay soils, plus sand, and the sand gives this suppleness, this lifting nose, and possibly also gives this a bit more oxy character, which is the candied palate and a bit of a more incense or cherry and the spirit touch. It is more warming on the end, I mean on the aftertaste, at the end of the palate. And you have this idea of being more diffused. But it is not ending very expansive. It is having that zinc and also that salty touch that we will find again in the wines that are coming from the southeastern part. So if you want to remember something, a take-home message, and then you'll see from the wine themselves that is peculiarity of Castelnuovo dell'Abate area, so the southeastern part, is the salt that you can get out of it. I asked the sommelier to pour the first wine of the second flight. Sommelier, first wine of the second flight, number 7, so that we compare, because we restart. Make sure that you trash or drink as you like the ones that we had earlier, because I want to go into that. So we stay in the same area, even if it's a cooler valley. So we're still in Castelnuovo dell'Abate. Keep your last glass, so keep Ciaccio Piccolomini and taste 2008. We started with 2008 here. 2008 Mastroianni. Mastroianni Winery sits just where Castelnuovo dell'Abate is, but it's facing east as opposed to Ciaccio Piccolomini Tarragona that is strongly facing south. And that makes a difference, because when you're facing east and you're here, as you can see from the relief, you have another high altitude hill, and therefore you find yourself in a valley, even if you're a 350 plus, but you're in a valley that it's probably one of the hottest during the day, but it's for sure the coolest during the night. So you have this diurnal switch, which is very strong. What we have in here, very classic one. 36 months in Allier oak barrels, 16, 33, 54 liters, fermented in concrete, big concrete. So you have quite big production in the context of this appellation for sure. And this is a wine, going back to a 10-year-old older wine compared to Ciaccio Piccolomini, sometimes cannot be giving justice to the older wines. In this case, I think you confirm that you can feel the saltiness even more. You can feel the umami very strongly. You can feel this idea of being expansive, but also very definite in its borders. Well, it's a wine that has a very disciplined behavior to me. And when we had these blind, we said, this is one guy that managed to harvest very late. Because you have tannins that are ripe, and still you have a lot of energy. So you could tell that there is cooler season, yes, but at the same time you've been trying to offset the cooler season by harvesting late, and because it's late, it's full of flavor. Really full of flavor. And the ability of having made an élevage 36 months gives it that really traceability of the borders of the wine on your palate. That's real value that we have. The next one, we go ahead. We want to move to the east-southeast part because we have a staple, which is Castelgiocondo, Frescobaldi family winery, that used to be, and still is, a strong player in that area. As I told you before, this quadrant here is the quadrant of bigger wineries, like Banfi, Castelgiocondo that we're tasting now, Argiano or Coldorcia. They have bigger extension here because it's sort of easier to have bigger parcel in this area. Because you're facing Maremma, as you can see here, you're going below 108 meters. They stay higher than that, especially even to go up, even upper than 400 plus. In this case, this is the house style Brunello, Castelgiocondo, regular one, no Riserva, and it is very classically made, meaning that it has long maceration, more than 1 month, 32 days, and it has pretty much no temperature control. They let the wine go pretty high in temperature. Also because there was a belief at that time that doing that could get rid of possible precipitates like quercetin and stuff. And then they have only barrels from the 70s, rather big ones, that were cyclically re-holled to renew the impact on the wine. And at this point was one of the moment that they had these new barrels. You can tell there is this degree of maritime character, like more pine, more on the garrigue side, more on the aromatic herbs, Mediterranean herbs. It's a bit of gentian, no? It's a bit pungent in the end. It's very interesting because the tannin looks expansive, there is much to it, but also is not really polished. It has a degree of punchiness on the tannin. To me that is extremely interesting to taste. And I tell you, so we had the opportunity to go around this area. Now, grande, so that I can start talking about the only Riserva wine that we are tasting today is number 9. So, number 9 Caprilli. So we are in the same slope in a much cooler area because it's a much higher altitude. And 2 vineyards, 350, 320 meters. Older vineyards, 40 plus years. And this is a white ferment in stainless steel. Yeah, and you have this idea of having higher temperature because you have really that macerated cherry you have the alcohol coming through. You really feel that. But it's not a wine that is meant to be smelled. This is a wine that is meant to be drunk and to really show what it's capable of on the palate. Sorry. And here you can tell what it was the Reserva concept back then. The ability to having a wine that is full of flavor, full of power, but it's never heavy. It's never dense to the point that it's chunky. But it's really, really interesting in its expression because you still find aromatics that are really unfolding, but at the same time, on the palate, you both enjoy the ability of being silky, but also being rather defined, clear. It's a classic one. These guys were among the first to have been taking part of the foundation of the consortium of the Brunello 50 plus years ago now. And they're still making the wine that has very long maceration, higher temperature, wild ferment, no pied de cuve, just wild ferment. You can tell, full of flavor. We go ahead with the last three, so that we finish pretty much in time, considering that we offset at the start. The last three wines that we're tasting are 2018. Consider where we are. You consider where we're going now. We're back in southeastern part. So that your first wine of the flight, Mastroianni, could be directly compared to this one. It should be here, not there. Sorry. La Fiorita winery, relatively young winery, under 20 years now. And they've been investing a lot, especially since 2016, in new oak, but big barrels, especially Slavonia, but not only, even Austrian oak. They have Mittelberger, they have Stockinger, they have Grenier, they have several arrays of different big fruit, which they're using in a very definite and detailed way to suit their different vineyards. So, for example, they have one vineyard facing south here, Collo Sorgo, that is calcareous red and grey clay, 220 meters, and that goes in the most suitable oak for it, which is possibly Grenier. Then they have the Piambossolino, very assertive, needing oak to have, because it's higher in elevation, you have clay and balestre, it's needing some sort of polymerization, more early polymerization compared to the others, and therefore they use stocking. So they really adjust it. They have the ability to do that because they have a new cellar and then they're trying to adjust that. And they're making, this is their house style, so it's important to do that. But they keep the technology there, so temperatures are low. You taste the wine, you tell why. Really fragrant, really crunchy fruit, really delicate, never overpowered. But full of flavor, full of salt. Once again, you have a lot of salt. You pinch your lips after, you lick your lips, it's salt. It's real sodium. It's like having been able to lick a rock. You still continue to feel that. A lot of salt, without weight. Very interesting. So, 36 months, And one thing that I think they've been able to put together is also reconverting their spurred cordon vineyards to Guyot. So by the time they had the opportunity to do that, they had a higher yield that was instrumental to crafting wines that have more ability to be visceral, has relieved the wine from a weight of lower yields that is not anymore a solution or an instrument for quality. That's my personal opinion. Then we move once again in the area that is more colonized by clay, but not only, because this one is the house style of Canalipto di Sopra 2018. So you have both the area around the winery that are gray, blue clay, and the area that comes from here, from Montalcino Hill, the most classic area of the appellation. It's a hill that's facing actually north. So you have vineyards that are later harvested from here to another. It's very windy and it's very sharp. But what they managed to do there, that sort of vintage, so a cooler, wetter vintage. Let's taste it. Because I don't want to say most of the fruit comes from there, but it's all from around 300 meters, but it's half and half. Half in clay, half in Galesti. You see how it is non-fruity. Non-fruit, and irony, and chalky on the nose, but then full of flavor, almost juicy, succulent on the palate. Really has a textural character. This is partially because they're using green and also they're using bigger oak and higher temperatures of fermentation. You can feel the power of this wine. You can feel the alcoholic character and really aftertaste, rising. It's quite a wine. Although it's not dense, it's rather easy to approach. They have, since this year, only Montalcino, and since a couple of years now, only Casaccia, so only the other clay part. So they have been able to crafting the wines in the way the wines themselves were going. But this wine, Bordeaux style, in the sense that they wanted to be this winery, Brunello, consisting year to year. And they have rather big oak, 25, 50 hectoliters. How we can finish, how we can compare these Canalipto with a Castello Banfi, but not the regular Castello Banfi, but the Poggio alle Mura. So the one coming only from a small parcel around the castle of Poggio alle Mura, which what they call Castello Banfi itself. And there you have clay as well. But it's a red clay, so it's a clay that is less difficult to cope with for the plants, because it's not full of salt, and the salt is a bit intoxicating the vine. So you have these sediments, but also there is a lot of rock and pebbles that help the granulosity and the ability to breathe of the roots, because Sangiovese is suffering a lot from having very compact soil, so they need rock and pebbles. So here, this wine was something that used to be made in 300 liters pièce, that they were picking the wine, the wood, coming to season the oak in their own winery, and then going to the tonnelier and putting it together. So it was seasoned on location. This is a wine that has been changing a lot. because there is a switch towards bigger oak. And you can tell this idea of being more on the incense, being more on the spiciness as opposed to being on the vanilla, coffee, and sometimes also in warmer vintages, even milk chocolate character from this sort of smaller oak. You have a lot of density, a lot of power, a lot of flavor even from outside of the wine, the fruit itself. At the same time, you still keep the saltiness and the rigor that is pretty much needed for a wine to age properly and to really find itself in a graceful period for most of these years. So, having said that, I wish over time we could do that 10-year challenge in a very, I'd say, running way, you know. So next year we do 9 versus 2019, diametrically opposite vintage, and we do 10 versus 20, another situation where we have diametrically opposite vintages. And also, what is my message about for today is that there is not only one word to define a vintage. You need much more depth of analysis, and it is nice and cool as well when you feel that the figures for the seasonal variation, temperature, rainfall, and everything fit what you find in the glass. Yeah, it's pretty much it. I hope you have a good time. Grazie. Have a pleasure. Any question, I'm happy to answer, but since we needed to be pretty sharp, I'm here. Thank you very much.